Hello, let's take a few moments to examine a crucial part of any presentation. That's where we move to the Q&A session at the end. This is a crucial part of our presentation because we're moving away from this monologue where we're doing all the speaking into a dialogue, a two-way conversation. And we hope that's going to allow the audience's attention and interest and their ability to recall the key information is all going to increase. So before we share some tips with you, why don't we take a moment to learn some common mistakes that people make, and who better to learn from than some politicians. So let's first of all take a look at a common mistake which is called pivoting. Pivoting away from the question, something maybe we're not comfortable speaking about on a topic, and pivoting towards a topic that we're more comfortable with. So the first example is Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. And here we can see him being very charming and charismatic. But as you watch the example, think about how you would perceive the level of trust and credibility when you can see somebody obviously try to pivot away from the question that's coming towards them.
But you know as well as I do that there is one subject on everybody's lips today, and they want to know why the police were called to your house in the early hours of Friday morning.
Ian, listen, I think what people have come here today, seductive interviewer, there you are. I think people have, I don't think they want to hear about that kind of thing, unless I'm wrong. I think, forgive me, I think what they want to hear, is what my plans are for the country and for our party.
We will come.
So we can see from that example that however charming and charismatic you might be, pivoting away from a question onto a completely different discussion point isn't always going to do a lot to build trust, confidence or credibility in the eyes of your audience. So let's move on to a second common mistake, and here we can see President Biden being asked a very simple question. It's a yes or a no answer. But he tries to answer almost like a lawyer. He distances himself and puts qualifying conditions into his answer. So think about the damage that it might cause when you're not answering a straight question with a straight answer.
Are you absolutely positive there is no record of any complaint by Tara Reade against you?
I am absolutely positive that no one that I'm aware of ever has been made aware of any complaint, a formal complaint made by or a complaint by Tara Reade against me at the time this allegedly happened 27 years ago or until I announced for I guess it was in April or May of this year.
And finally, we go back to a third common mistake that we often see politicians use, and that's trying to avoid the question altogether. We go back to Prime Minister Boris Johnson, where an experienced journalist is asking him a pointed question, where he tries to avoid it 26 times. We've sped up the video in the example a little, but as you watch it, think about the impact on the audience when the question is not being answered clearly.
The difficulty is that the minute you say one thing, you obviously are bringing people, your loved ones, your family, into the public domain in a way that is not fair.
Then why the picture today?
Newspapers will print whatever they're going to print.
Well, where did it come
from?
What
I want to do is
Boris
talk
Johnson,
about
where did the picture come
the
from?
longer we spend.
No,
on
we'll
issues,
come to that. Don't worry. We've got 20 minutes to do this.
The longer we spend, I can't determine what the newspapers decide to.
But you knew the picture was being put out there.
I can't determine what the newspapers.
That's a yes or no, and then
to,
we'll move on. Mr.
I can't
Johnson.
determine what.
I'm guaranteeing you 20 minutes.
Let's
did
get
you know
on.
this? I'm guaranteeing that. Did you know this picture was out there? So that's a state secret when
It's
the
not a
picture was
state
taken.
secret.
So when was it taken?
I'm not going to comment on the
trying to get
antiquity or the
questions.
provenance of some photo that newspapers decide to put on their front page.
So fascinating to see some real life examples of common mistakes that even the most experienced presenters can make. So let's take a moment to equip ourselves with a simple and clever technique to handle difficult questions during the Q&A. The tool that I want to introduce you to is called APAC. It stands APAC, and that means A is for acknowledge, P for paraphrase or probe, A for answer, and then C for confirm. Let's take a moment to deep dive into each of these steps and look at them in detail. So the first A is for acknowledge, and this reminds us that by simply acknowledging the question, we can buy ourselves a few seconds of thinking time. So one example could be, yeah, that's a good question. I was thinking about that a lot last night when I was putting these slides together. Or Yeah, I'm sure that's a valid point. Maybe a lot of people in the audience might be thinking the same thing. But by doing that, I'm showing that I'm calm and confident under pressure. I'm showing that it's safe to ask me questions because I'm a subject matter expert. But most importantly, I've bought myself a few seconds to help shape my answer. After acknowledging the question, we can move on to P, which is for paraphrase or probe. Paraphrase is easy. We simply paraphrase, we summarize the question back, showing that we've listened and checking our understanding of the question. Now, this might buy ourselves another 5 or 10 seconds of thinking time. If that's not enough, you might even want to do the second P, which is probe. Now, you have to be careful here because sometimes when people ask a direct question, they want a direct answer. But occasionally you can use a probe or a question to understand the context or the background, or understand if somebody has a particular point of view, or if there's any specifics that you need to understand in order to answer the question fully. So I particularly like the acknowledge and the probe and the paraphrase, not simply because it buys me a few seconds of thinking time, but it gives me that discipline to ensure that I'm not just simply answering the easy questions and then using that for the most challenging questions. I use it on every single one that doesn't broadcast to my audience on how confident or nervous I am. Just like a gambler in Las Vegas or Macau, they're going to want to have this poker face. They don't want to show everybody else around the table how confident they are. By having that poker face and using that to buy yourself some thinking time, you can ensure that people aren't going to be reading your confidence level through your body language or through the way you answer a question. But eventually we need to move to A for answer. And this is the bit where we give a succinct or a concise answer to a direct question. Or maybe we need to break down a complex answer into 3 areas. Maybe we need to talk about this issue, and then we need to move on to that challenge, and then finally we need to address this other thing over here. We can perhaps explore some areas within our answer, or if we don't know, here's the time where we need to confess and say, look, I don't have that information, but I can get it to you by Tuesday. Would you prefer it morning or afternoon? What would you prefer? Maybe you can come to some sort of agreement in order to get that information across. But then we move to the final part of APAC, which is C for confirm. And here is where we need to confirm with our questioner, have we answered their question directly? Do they have the information they need in order to make a decision? Have we been succinct or concise and addressed the issue at hand? So there we have it, ladies and gentlemen, a simple way of addressing questions during that Q&A session. Have a think about how you can incorporate that into your habits and how you structure your answers, and think about how in preparation for your next big presentation, you can ensure that you've got some ways to acknowledge or paraphrase the questions that come at you in order to make sure you're confident preparing your answer.